Yes, Virginia. Dear, I told you I would be there by Tuesday noon. Yes, I love you too. I was in the call with my girlfriend while waiting for the bus when I felt a hand over my shoulder. I turned and saw an old man who looked like he could die any moment smiling at me. Son, does the bus for Ice Island go from here? As he spoke, I knew he had already gone senile. No, such a place doesn't exist. The bus for Sapai would be going from here, I said, and went back to focusing on my phone. For a moment, I felt the old man gazing at me with anger, and the minute I turned to see him, he was still smiling at me. Thinking I might be imagining things, I went near a beach and sat there while scrolling through my phone. It looks like the bus is late, huh? As I was looking at my watch, a girl said while sitting beside me. Yeah, I think so too, I replied. Georgia, by the way. Her hand gesture seemed like she was more than interested in just exchanging names. John, it's a pleasure to meet you. I shook her hand with a smile on my face. There was no harm in making an acquaintance while on the trip to keep myself entertained. I mean, what Virginia wouldn't know wouldn't hurt. I talked with the girl until the bus finally arrived and everyone present there, including the old man, started to get on. Frankly, she had quite a bubbly personality, and I had started to like her company. As she was speaking, I couldn't feel anyone else chatting at all, which was the only strange thing in this situation. I got on the bus and went to the second back seat, and soon after that, I saw Georgia smiling and waving at me from the front. She walked back and sat on the seat next to mine. It was fine, since I knew for a fact that she would not let me be bored during the ride, and I was right about that. The moment she sat next to me, she started blabbering her mouth, but I couldn't help but notice that not a single person sitting there was letting a word out of their mouth. They were all sitting in a similar posture looking forward, which I guess Georgia did not seem to notice. After chatting continuously for 2 hours, she finally fell asleep. Honestly, at this point, I wasn't even surprised that everyone else was silent, because it was obvious that listening to her can make anyone lose the will to speak ever again. I felt like I was finally able to relax, so I leaned back and tried to get a shut-eye. But the moment I closed my eyes, I felt the brake hitting suddenly and the bus stopping. So I opened my eyes thinking it might be for a rest stop, but as I looked outside the window, I saw that we were stopped in the middle of nowhere. I called out for the bus driver asking if everything was okay, but he did not respond, nor did anyone else present there. They all just stood there in the same position as they were sitting earlier when the bus departed. I got this weird chill down my spine, along with an eerie feeling that something was very wrong here. So I nudged the girl sitting next to me with my elbow to wake her up, but she did not budge. As I started to shake her with nervousness in my voice when calling her, I felt everyone else's head turning back 360 degrees to me. My entire body froze and my voice got stuck in my throat. I felt like I was about to get a heart attack and it would burst any moment out of my chest. That was when I felt Georgia waking up, and I turned to her in hopes of help, only to find blood dripping from her eyes on her crusty and molded skin. I had no idea where did I get the courage to stand up and ran out of the bus, but I did. I ran as fast as I could, and I could feel them chasing me, but I did not dare to look back. That was when I stumbled on a rock and fell. My nose started to bleed, so I covered it with my hand and stood back up. As I started running, I felt a sharp pain in my leg. Guess my knee had also been bruised, but I continued running. Soon after that, my vision started to get blurry, and I got a concussion and fell. As I heard footsteps closing in and my energy getting drained out, I wished with everything for this to be a nightmare. John, wake up! It's the last stop. I opened my eyes and I heard a faint voice and saw Georgia shaking me. I looked around and everything seemed normal, including her, which made me stare at her in disbelief because it all felt too real to be a nightmare. "What happened? Why are you looking at me all pale?" she asked with a chuckle. "Nothing. I guess I had a nightmare." I massaged my aching neck and said, I was still very startled by the nightmare I'd just had, "Oh, don't worry, you're not in the nightmare anymore." I don't know if it was because of the nightmare or the way she said it, but it felt pretty alarming to me. I looked outside and it was morning. Everyone was getting off the bus, so I also stood up and started to walk away from the seat. As I took the first step, I felt a sharp pain in my leg as if I had recently hurt myself. That was when I glanced over to George's side, who was still sitting and smiling at me, which was getting creepier by the second. I rushed out of the bus, and the moment I got off, that same old man from earlier came to me and asked, "Who were you talking to the entire way here? I mean, don't get me wrong, but there was no one sitting beside you." As I heard this, I looked over to the window of the bus where I was sitting with Georgia, and the seats were empty with no one there. I passed out right after that, and when I woke up, I was in the hospital. The doctors told me that I had a heart attack and asked me to call any guardian if I had one. I told them there was no one. I was so terrified that I even forgot why I came to this town in the first place. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
I'm a DJ here in South Korea, and because English is not my first language, please excuse me if there are any mistakes here. 20 years ago, I was driving home from a late-night wedding gig. It was around 4:30 a.m., and I was driving south on our equivalent of an interstate highway, when at one point, the retaining walls on each side of the highway grew very narrow due to the road snaking through mountain passes and other tunnel-like places. It's not like a particularly dangerous place to drive, but the blind bends definitely made me a little nervous as I slowed down to traverse them. Good job I did too, because suddenly, out of nowhere, a young woman jumped out in front of my car, and I was forced to slam on the brakes hard. I swear I almost gave myself whiplash, but I managed to stop in time, and I was so angry that I got out of my car to shout at her. What was she even thinking that she was doing? She looked up at me, didn't say a word in reply, then actually ran to the passenger side door and climbed into my car. It was then that I realized that she was evidently running from someone or something. So I freaked out for a second and as many minutes, then jumped back into my car and drove off. I kept asking her, "Are you okay? Who's chasing you?" But she only ever replied with, "I'm sorry, I just need to call my mom. I just need to call my mom." She looked to be in her late teens, with dyed blonde hair and dirty clothes that made it look like she tripped a few times while escaping an attacker. I told her it was okay, that I'd drive her somewhere so she could call her parents, but I couldn't get a straight answer out of her because she was panicking and crying. We'd both seen the figure in my rearview mirror as we drove away. It caused her to scream out, which made me speed up. I thought she might calm down a little so she could tell me what was going on, but she was terrified and just kept saying I need to call Mom whenever she calmed down enough to talk. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't she just use a cell phone? Well, this was a time when not everyone in South Korea could afford cell phones. They were in the market, sure, but to buy even a terrible one would require at least middle-class salaries, so I had to wait until I saw a 24-hour gas station to find anywhere the girl could use the phone. I asked her if she needed any change to use the payphones, but she just looked up at me and said the same thing. I just need to call Mom. I think that's when I realized that something wasn't right. It was literally the only thing she said to me for the entire ride, and when we stopped, she just got out and ran into the grocery store. It was very evident that she was terrified of whoever had been following her, and it was also evident that they were too scared to talk about it, so, trying to be a good citizen, I called the police and told them everything. I kept the car running and kept watching the girl as she used the payphone. The police dispatcher told me it would be around 10 minutes before the police arrived, and I was worried she'd freak out if she found out I called them. So, That was what was occupying my mind as I watched the girl put the phone down before she appeared to start walking back towards my car. Suddenly, she stopped, and she turned back towards the gas station as if she'd heard something around the corner of it, which was completely dark and not covered by any lights. I watched as she walked closer and closer towards it, almost like someone was calling her name into the darkness. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a man leap out of the darkness, grab her, and drag her back into it. I immediately put my foot down, zooming around to where she'd been grabbed so I can illuminate the darkness with my headlights. It was a matter of seconds, and I thought I'd see some predator trying to drag her behind a dumpster or something, but there was no one there. No one there at all. It actually took my breath away for a moment. There didn't seem to be anywhere for two people to disappear, just a chain link fence and the rear of the gas station. So where had they gone? Before I got a chance to look any further, the police showed up, so I ran over to their car and frantically told them what I'd just seen. We searched the area completely. They even checked in the back room of the gas station, but there was no one fitting the description of the girl or the attacker. The police thanked me for filing the report, but told me that there was no longer any reason for me to be there. It was about 5:30 in the morning by that time, and adrenaline was starting to wear off, so I did as I was told and went home to sleep. Naturally, it wasn't the most peaceful sleep of my life, and my first thoughts when I awoke were that that poor girl had been dragged into the shadows. And I never learned of her fate. Nothing was in the news about it, and when I contacted the police about it, they just told me it was under investigation. But the thing that I find really scary about the whole thing is how there was a man chasing her when she got into my car on the highway, and we must have driven at least 5 or 6 miles away from the scene. It couldn't have been the same guy who grabbed her, and there's no way of anyone knowing where we were headed. So how was someone able to find her at the gas station? Was it something to do with the phone call she'd made? I have so many unanswered questions about this event in my life, and sometimes I feel like it haunts me. I find myself scared of total strangers whose names I didn't even know, and as much as I hope she's okay, somewhere, and what happened was part of some horrible but brief chapter in her life, I have the worst feeling that she's not okay at all.
This happened last night, and honestly, I'm still a bit shaken up about it. I work evenings as a dispatcher in a medium-sized Midwestern city. I was driving home at 2 a.m. when I stopped for gas. In retrospect, it was stupid to have stopped at all. The gas station was poorly lit and empty of any other customers, but I knew the shady areas of town, and this was usually not one of them. As I was pumping gas, I noticed a middle-aged woman sitting on the curb across the parking lot. It was a cold night and had just started raining. The woman was not wearing weather-appropriate clothing and was drenched. When the woman saw that I was watching her, she called out to me from across the parking lot. My second of many stupid decisions that night was choosing to engage with her. I was worried for her, so I approached her to see what sort of help I could offer. "Hi, beautiful. I'm just trying to get home, but no one will help me. I'm trying to get into the city, but the cab ride is $60 and I only have $40. Can you help me?" I don't usually give money to panhandlers, but this woman seemed genuine. The weather was terrible, and my job centers around helping people, so I agreed. I told her I didn't have any cash, but if she would come inside with me, I'd take some money out of the ATM and give her a few bucks. I went inside for cash, but the ATM wasn't working. I apologized and told her there was nothing else I could do. She followed me back outside, idly chatting with me as I opened my driver's door to get in. Then, she got in my car. I was too shocked to say anything. I sat staring at her as she buckled herself into the passenger seat. As soon as she got in my car, her demeanor changed entirely. She no longer seemed, for as much as she did, extremely excited and restless. "Just take me to my aunt's house. She can give me money," she said. Of course, alarm bells are going off in my head. Although my first instinct was to tell her to get the hell out of my car, my guts told me that would be dangerous. She'd already proven to be unpredictable and seemed to be high. I didn't know if she had any weapon on her while forcing her way into my vehicle. I thought it had the potential to elicit a violent reaction. Where are you asking me to take you? Just start driving. I'll tell you when to turn. Nope. If you want me to consider driving you somewhere, I need you to tell me where we're going. I said that with no real intention of driving her anywhere. Don't worry, honey. I'm not a bad chick. I'm not going to rob you. Just drive. No. What's your aunt's address? As I was asking her questions, she got agitated. We still had not left the gas station parking lot. I considered getting out of my car and going to the gas station for help, but she seemed to know and be friendly with one of the attendants inside. Besides, I wasn't about to leave her alone in my car. Finally, she snapped at me and said, "Why are you asking me so many questions? I thought we were friends. Don't you trust me?" "I work at the police department," I said. "It's my job to ask these sorts of questions." She flipped out and started yelling at me about being a snitch, about trying to get her into trouble, just generally losing her damn mind. At this point, I'm more scared than ever. I just wanted her gone, but my instinct still told me to get her out of my car. I decided to take a risk. I'm not a police officer. I just work at a police department. Why don't I take you to Walmart and see if they have an ATM that works? My idea was to get her out of the car as peacefully as possible and lose her in the store. She liked my idea and immediately calmed down. I knew that the driving off with the woman in my car was incredibly risky, but it seemed like my best option at the time. As we were driving, she kept talking to me. Her thoughts were erratic, bouncing all over the place. It sometimes seems difficult for her to follow through with a thought, but this is roughly how our conversation went. I'm glad we're friends now. I've had about 5 or 6 people trying to get me. I'm going to come to your work tomorrow so we can arrest them. Okay, we can talk about it tomorrow. Tonight, you said you were trying to get home. Yeah, honey. I'm really trying to get out into the sticks. Sticks? I thought you said you wanted to get to the city. Yeah, I meant city. That's what I meant. That's why the cab ride's $40. It's far away. The cab ride's $40? Yeah, baby. You said you had $40. I do, baby, but I have $40 for the cab ride. And then there was silence. Are you sure you can't take me to my aunt's house? Sweetie, she lives down on Fuller Road. That's not what you said before. Oh no, baby, I'm sorry. Oh, it doesn't matter. She won't give me the money anyway. Are you sure you can't just take me to the city? It was terrifyingly obvious that this woman was utterly full of crap because the details of her story were constantly changing. When we pulled into the Walmart parking lot, she finally got out of my car, only after I left first, and followed me into the store. I told her before we went to find an ATM that I needed to use the restroom. I planned to call the police from inside the stall, but she followed me into the bathroom. And that's when things got weird. She grabbed onto the crook of my arm and whispered in my ear, "If you don't have any money, that's okay. Let me ask you something, sweetie. Do you like being eaten out?" I told her no as forcefully as I could manage. Get into a stall, locked the door as fast as I could manage. As soon as I had a barrier between us, I said, "You know, I have some friends at the police department that could probably help you better than I can. I'm just going to call them and see if we can figure this out together." Again, at the mention of the cops, she began screaming at me, and I just kept reiterating that the police would help her. She snapped at me and she said she was going to leave and stormed out, but it wasn't over. I wanted to make sure she was gone. Sure enough, not 60 seconds after she left, she came into the bathroom and started banging on the stall door. Then she said something that scared me more than anything else. "Hey, come back to your car with me. I left my beer in your car." I blatantly told her no. I saw her get into my car, and she had absolutely nothing with her other than the clothes on her back. After that, she left the bathroom again and didn't come back. I waited a good 5 minutes before exiting the bathroom. I immediately found a manager who called the police for me. Thankfully, I was in a different police jurisdiction from the one I worked because I was mortified at how entirely stupid I had been for the whole night and would have died of embarrassment. If a coworker had responded, The officer that responded took my statement and advised me to be more careful in the future. He said that sometimes panhandlers turn violent, and that just recently there had been a woman who matched my description of assaulting the Good Samaritan that had stopped to try to help her. I learned my lesson on stranger danger, and I'm lucky to have come out unscathed. I'm glad my stupidity didn't kill me. So, fellow listeners, the next time you try and help a stranger late at night, don't.
Kuster County, Oklahoma, a small county of not so diverse people. It's not the very lavish town that people think it is, and probably isn't the richest. One would say that what people have here is a life paced, slow, and easy when it comes to all the shenanigans life is about now. Now, this story dates back to the night of the prom in '89 in Custer County High School. It wasn't the very best school that one would think of. The class of '89, on the other hand, was the most promising class that the school has ever had. It was the academic and the social peak that the class of '89 brought to the Custer County. And in general, it was the four friends who were the bright, young, charming minds of Custer County. The future faces of the place that made everyone proud of their little town. Frank Abigail Jr., son of a single father. His mother died of lung cancer at a very young age, and he grew up with his father, a great man making an honest living as a physics teacher, and the very source of all the academic brilliance that Frank Jr. was praised for. Frank Jr. wanted to be an astronomer and work for NASA, exploring other worlds and studying stars. Now, on the contrary, there was Christian. The bond that Frank Jr. and Christian held was stronger than that of blood. They were friends, but they were stronger than any pair of brothers could. The only difference was Christian was deep-rooted. He loved the very dirt he walked on. He wanted to be a farmer and was highly involved with his father in all the farming and agriculture. He always was deep-rooted. Frank and Christian spent a whole lot of time together, and their friendship dated back to the very first time that Franks came into the town. Together, they celebrated their achievements, and together, they went through all the grief. The county people knew that Frank and Christian cannot be found anywhere separated. They were always together, and their friendship was an example of character. But it wasn't just Frank and Christian. Their bond was shared along with Claire and Doug. Claire and Doug were the power couple of Custer County High School, and together, these four were the most popular students of the school, and to everyone's surprise, kindest and most helpful too. Claire was the only daughter of the industrialist of the town, and Doug the son of the editor of the local Custer County newspaper. Despite the confrontations and differences of thoughts between both their parents, Claire and Doug were very much in love and were ready to spend their whole life together. Doug was about to go to New York to follow into his father's footprint and become a journalist, and Claire just wanted to be with him. It was the night of the prom of '89, the biggest event in their life, and every single student in Custer High was pretty excited about it. It was the last prom for Frank and his friends. After this, they were all moving to college, and probably not be together for a long time. It was an emotional and a really special night for all of them. They all gathered together at Claire's house and went together to the prom. Despite their kind nature and goodness, their friendship was loathed by many. They all arrived at prom, and it was magical, with the lights and the music. The prom seemed like a perfect send-off to their old life, and a great welcome party for the new transitions that they were about to get into. They all started dancing. and Doug noticed that one of their classmates was being pushed in by Riley. Riley was the typical bully, and he was also the mayor's only son, so nobody messed with him, not even the teachers. Doug saw Riley pushing over a kid out of the hall, so he decided to follow them, and Frank, Christian, and Claire, as usual, followed Doug. They soon left the hall and entered the gallery. Following Doug, they were all behind the school's canteen and outside of school. Doug confronted, as Riley was busy harassing the boy. Frank Jr., Christian, and Claire followed. Now they all gathered in the empty parking lot of the school. It was dark, and the loud noise of music was muffled into the silence of the night outside. They confronted Riley and his friends, and somehow managed to stop them from bullying the poor kid. They went back to the party, but Riley and his friends were pissed. They decided to take revenge on Doug and his friends. The prom was at its peak, and they were waiting for the opportunity, and they soon got one. They snuck into the ladies' washroom and waited behind closed doors for Claire to come. As soon as she entered, they all jumped on her and held her mouth shut and grabbed her. Riley came in close and forcefully kissed her and grabbed her from behind. Emily, one of the classmates of Claire, entered the washroom and saw that she walked away from the scene and ran to tell it to Doug and alert the authorities. Doug, Frank, and Christian ran towards the washroom and barged in. Riley was forcefully kissing her as Claire was crying and trying to break free. They barged in and fight broke in, and they started fighting. And soon, the authorities were alerted and the prom got canceled. Even after Claire's statement, Riley was not convicted for the charges of sexual assault and attempted rape. Claire was traumatized by the whole incident and wallowed more and more into the darkness, but her friends were always by her side. Doug held her and loved her even more, and Christian and Frank stood by her side every second. Seeing Riley walk free made all of them angry, and they decided that they shall punish Riley instead, and they will become the law if the law doesn't help them. They were witnessing that the fact that Riley was not convicted made him even more confident about his invincibility and lacking a justice system. They devised a plan to put an end to this before leaving the town. They made a fake invitation for a party at the Foss Reservoir and made sure that Riley and his friends got that. After confirming, they waited at the three-way junction for all of them to arrive. It was a night, and Riley and his friends were driving across the three-way junction. As soon as they were about to take the turn away from Foss Reservoir, a truck collided with them with the force, and their car was pushed towards the edges. Riley's friend, who was on the front passenger seat, died on the first impact. Riley was able to make out the face of the driver. It was Claire, and Doug was right there beside her. And on the rear, it was Frank and Christian. Claire pulled the reverse, and with another impact, the car went on to drop into the reservoir, along with every single one of them. Claire, Doug, Frank, and Christian stepped out of the car to see if there were any survivors. They stepped down to the ridge to find that Riley made it out of the car on time, and he was ducking on the ridge. They all started chasing Riley, and wounded and in shock, Riley started running. After 15 minutes, they were able to corner him. That is when Doug hit Riley, and Frank and Christian held him. Claire took out the blade from the car and went on closer to Riley and stabbed him in the scrotum. Riley was crying in pain. On his knees, his hands were between his legs, and he was pleading and begging. Doug took out a recorder and told him to confess all the things that he has done, and to confess everything that his father did to protect him. And it was the only way that Riley would walk out of there alive. Without hesitation, Riley confessed to everything. Even Claire, Doug, Frank, and Christian were disgusted by all the things that he had done, and were disappointed that his father let him walk away from all these crimes. They told him to stand up and walk away. As Riley was walking away, they looked at each other, and after a while, noise of a big splash was heard around, as if someone had jumped into the reservoir. The next few days, a copy of the tape of Riley's confession was sent to different media outlets in and outside Oklahoma. The missing report of Riley and his friends was now piled under the controversy of his father and all the arrests and paperwork that it brought them. 20 years later, a diver found a car rusted away in the depth of Foss River, and in it were the skeleton of Riley and his friends. What remains a big mystery is how did the body of Riley end up in the car? Claire and Doug got married, moved to England, and are still living there with their 2 daughters. Frank Abigail Jr. went on to become an astronaut at NASA. While I am still living in Oklahoma, I found my love for storytelling, and now I am the chief editor at the local newspaper in Kuster High.